The front door clicked shut behind me, the sound echoing a little too loudly in the quiet house. I shrugged off my jacket, the weight of the day finally lifting. The scent of her favorite lavender candle drifted from the living room, a small familiar comfort. I smiled, picturing her curled up on the couch, maybe reading, maybe waiting for me. I kicked off my shoes, the cool tile, a welcome sensation on my tired feet. We'd built this life together, brick by brick. A shared laugh over burnt toast, late night talks under the stars, the quiet understanding that filled the spaces between words. I thought about the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she really laughed, the soft curve of her hand in mine. A warmth spread through me, a familiar contentment. I walked towards the living room, the soft glow of the lamp spilling out into the hallway. My hand reached for the door handle, the smooth metal cool against my skin. Just a few more steps and I'd be home. But the sound stopped me, a sound that wasn't hers, a low guttural sound laced with something urgent. My hand froze on the handle. A knot tightened in my stomach, a cold, hard knot that hadn't been there a moment before. I pushed the door open. The world tilted on its axis. The air thickened, heavy and suffocating. The soft glow of the lamp became a harsh, glaring spotlight, illuminating a tableau that shattered everything I knew. Her and him, Liam, my friend, my colleague. His back was to me, his body pressed against hers, his hands. I couldn't even process what his hands were doing. Her head was thrown back, her hair a dark, tangled mess against the cushions. Her face was a mask of something I didn't recognize, something primal, something hungry. The sound, it was coming from her. My breath hitched in my throat, the knot in my stomach twisted, tightening into a vice around my heart. My vision blurred, the edges of the room dissolving into a hazy, distorted mess. It couldn't be. It couldn't be. Liam, we'd had beers after work, talked about sports, about life. He'd been at our anniversary dinner, raising his glass in a toast. He'd smiled at me. And now it was this. My wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone, the woman I'd built my world around, the woman whose laughter was my favorite song. Like she was there with him. The scent of lavender, once a comfort, now became a cloying, sickening sweetness. The warmth in my chest turned to ice, spreading through my veins, freezing me from the inside out. Time seemed to warp, stretching and distorting. Every detail burned into my memory with painful clarity. The way her dress was hiked up, the way his hand gripped her hip, the way their bodies moved together in a grotesque, obscene rhythm. I stood there frozen, a statue carved from shock and disbelief. My mind struggled to comprehend, to reconcile the image before me with the reality of my life. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. But it was. The scene unfolded before me, a brutal, undeniable truth. And with each passing second, the foundation of my world crumbled, leaving me standing in the wreckage of a life I thought I knew. I don't remember moving. One moment I was rooted to the spot, a silent witness to my own destruction. The next, I was somewhere else. The hallway, I think, or maybe the porch. The cool night air hit my face, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the living room. My ears rang, a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. I tasted bile in the back of my throat. I leaned against something solid, the rough texture digging into my back. The world spun. What did I say? Did I scream? Did I whisper? Did I even speak at all? I have no idea. The words, if there were any, are lost in the chaos of that moment. I remember her face, the look on her face, not the hunger from before, but something else. Shock, fear, a flash of something that might have been regret, but it was gone too quickly. And him, Liam, he just stared, like a deer caught in headlights. His expression a mixture of surprise and something I couldn't quite place, but it wasn't remorse. I turned away. I couldn't look at them anymore. The image was seared into my brain, a brand that would never fade. Where did I go? I think I drove. I remember the feel of the steering wheel in my hands, the hum of the engine, the blur of the streetlights. But I don't remember the route. I don't remember where I was going. My mind was a battlefield, a war raging between what I thought I knew and what I now knew. Every memory, every shared moment, every whispered secret, it was all tainted, poisoned. Our wedding day, the way she looked at me, her eyes shining with love. The first time we said, I love you, the shy smiles, the trembling hands, the way we decorated this house, turning it into a home. Lies, all lies. Was it all a performance? Was I just a fool, a pawn in some twisted game? The questions hammered at me, relentless and unforgiving. I replayed conversations in my head, searching for clues, for signs I'd missed, but there were none. Or maybe I was just too blind to see them. The trust, the absolute, unwavering trust I had in her, it was gone, shattered into a million pieces, scattered like dust in the wind. How could I have been so wrong? How could I have been so stupid? I thought about the future we'd planned, the children we talked about, the trips we dreamed of, the life we were building together. It was all a mirage, a beautiful, fragile illusion that had just been shattered. The pain, it was physical, a crushing weight on my chest, a constant ache in my throat. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out and stomped on it. I was alone, utterly, completely alone. Even in a crowded room, I would have felt this isolation, this betrayal. The world I knew was gone, and in its place was a void, a dark, empty space where my life used to be, a space that was now filled with nothing but pain and the gnawing, festering seed of something else, something dark, something cold, something that felt a lot like revenge. The days that followed were a blur, a haze of sleepless nights, half-eaten meals, and a constant gnawing ache. I wandered through the house, a ghost in my own life. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional mocking tick of the clock. I saw her, briefly, when I went back to get some clothes. She tried to talk, words spilled from her mouth, apologies, explanations, pleas, but they were just sounds, meaningless noise. I couldn't hear her, I couldn't look at her. I stayed at a hotel, some generic, anonymous place, the kind where no one knows your name and no one cares. I stared at the television, the flickering images, a meaningless distraction. I couldn't focus, I couldn't think. The initial shock began to recede, replaced by something colder, something harder. The pain was still there, a constant, dull throb, but it was now overlaid with something else. Anger, a slow-burning, white-hot fury. At first, the thoughts were just flashes, images of confrontation, of yelling, of making them feel the way I felt. But they were fleeting, unformed, the kind of things you think in the heat of the moment, knowing you'll never act on them. But then something shifted. A subtle, almost imperceptible change. The anger stopped being a chaotic storm and started to coalesce into something more focused, more deliberate. The questions changed. It wasn't just why anymore, it was how. How could they do this to me? How could they betray me so completely? And then, inevitably, how can I make them pay? The first idea was small, a tiny seed of retribution, a way to even the score maybe, a way to let them know that their actions had consequences. It was a vague, almost innocent thought, but it was there. I imagined, I don't know, something subtle, something that would disrupt their lives, make them uncomfortable, a way to let them know I knew without revealing myself completely. But even that small thought, it felt good, a twisted kind of satisfaction. It was a release, a way to channel the pain and anger into something productive. And then the thoughts started to grow, to become more elaborate, more detailed. The initial vague idea took shape, became a plan, a series of steps, each one leading to the next. I started to think about their lives, their routines, their weaknesses, what would hurt them the most, what would make them feel the same kind of devastation that I felt. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It wasn't about understanding. It was about justice. Or maybe it was just about revenge. I wasn't sure. I didn't care. The idea took hold. It burrowed into my mind, took root, and started to grow. It became a constant companion, a dark, seductive voice whispering in my ear. It was no longer a question of if. It was a question of when and how. The pain was still there, but it was no longer the only thing. It was fuel, fuel for the fire that was now burning inside me, a fire that was consuming me, transforming me. I was changing. I could feel it. The man I was, he was gone, and in his place was something else, something colder, something determined. I made a decision, a conscious, deliberate choice. I would do it. I would make them pay. I would have my revenge. The hotel room became my command center, the generic desk, littered with discarded papers and half-empty coffee. Cups transformed into a makeshift planning station. I spent hours there staring at a laptop screen, my mind a whirlwind of calculations and considerations. Sleep was a luxury I could no longer afford. I existed on adrenaline and a burning, singular focus. The world outside the hotel walls faded into a distant hum. My world was now confined to the four walls of that room, and the intricate web I was weaving in my head. The first step was information. I needed to know their movements, their routines. I needed to understand their vulnerabilities. I started with the obvious, social media. Their online lives, once a source of shared joy, now became a map, a guide to their weaknesses. I scrolled through photos, read their posts, piecing together a picture of their daily lives, a twisted kind of intimacy. I saw her smile, the same smile that used to light up my world, now directed at him. A pang of something close to grief, flickered within me, but I quickly extinguished it. This wasn't about grief anymore. I learned his schedule, his work hours, his gym visits, his favorite coffee shop. I saw where they went together, the restaurants, the parks, the places that were once ours. Each piece of information was a weapon, a tool to be used. I thought about the most effective way to strike. Not something violent, not at first. Something like subtle. Something that would sow seeds of doubt, of paranoia. Something that would make them look at each other differently. A whisper campaign, anonymous messages, carefully crafted to create suspicion, to undermine their fragile connection, to make them question each other's motives, their loyalty. It was a delicate game, a game of shadows and whispers. I had to be careful, meticulous. One wrong move and they would know. And then everything would change. I practiced the messages in my head, refining them, perfecting them. Each word was chosen with precision, designed to inflict maximum damage. It was like writing a script, but this script was for their destruction. I thought about the consequences. What if they found out? What if this thing I was doing spiraled out of control? But the thought didn't deter me. It only fueled the fire. I justified it to myself. They deserved this. They had shattered my life, and now I was going to return the favor. An eye for an eye, a life for a life, or at least a piece of their lives. I wasn't a monster, I wasn't. But they had turned me into something else, something I didn't recognize, something driven. The planning became an obsession. It consumed my every waking moment. I ate, slept, and breathed revenge. It was a dark, twisted purpose, but it was my purpose. I felt a strange sense of control, a perverse satisfaction in knowing that I was the one pulling the strings, that I was the one dictating the terms. The first step was the hardest, to cross that line, to go from thinking about it to actually doing it. But once I made the decision, once I pressed send on that first message, there was no turning back. The plan was in motion, the game had begun, and I was ready to play. The burner phone felt cold and heavy in my hand, a cheap, disposable device purchased from a nameless kiosk in a forgotten corner of the city. It vibrated, a single, silent pulse. The message was sent. A wave of something washed over me. Not satisfaction, not yet. More like a release, a letting go of pent-up energy. The waiting was over. The first move had been made. I watched, from a distance. I followed them, not too close, not too obviously. I became a shadow, a silent observer in their lives. I saw them go to dinner, to the movies, to the park, the places we used to go. The first sign was subtle. A flicker of unease in her eyes, a hesitation in her touch, a slight tightening of his jaw. They were there, but something was different. Something had shifted. I saw them talking, whispering, their faces etched with concern. They looked around, their eyes darting, searching. They knew. They didn't know what they knew, but they knew something was wrong. He checked his phone constantly, his brow furrowed. She jumped at every unexpected sound, her hand trembling as she reached for his. They were on edge, uncomfortable, suspicious. My message had found its mark. A small victory, perhaps, but a victory nonetheless. A crack in their armor, a seed of doubt planted in their minds. I felt a strange sense of power, to be able to manipulate them, to control their emotions from afar. It was a dark, twisted feeling, but it was intoxicating. I saw them argue, a brief, tense exchange in the middle of a crowded street. Words exchanged, sharp and low. He walked away, his back rigid. She stood there, her face a mask of confusion and anger. The whispers were working. I followed him, to his office, to his car, to his apartment. I learned his routines, his habits. I became familiar with his world, the world that had intersected with mine and stolen a piece of it. I saw her at the coffee shop we used to frequent. She sat alone, staring into her cup, her expression lost and forlorn. A pang of something like guilt, flickered within me. But I pushed it aside. This was their doing. The guilt was a luxury I couldn't afford. I saw them together again, but it was different now. The ease, the intimacy, the connection, it was gone, replaced by a strained politeness, a forced closeness. They were trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. But the whispers were there in the air between them, poisoning their every interaction. I felt a cold satisfaction. To see them suffer, to see them unravel. It wasn't the same as the pain I felt, but it was something, a small measure of balance, but it wasn't enough. The first act was over. It had served its purpose, it had set the stage, but it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The seed had been planted, and now it was time to watch it grow. The whispers weren't enough. They had served their purpose, creating cracks in their facade, but the foundation was still standing. I needed to do more. I needed to push harder. The anger inside me was no longer a controlled burn. It was a wildfire, consuming everything in its path. I felt myself changing, becoming someone I didn't recognize. The line between victim and something else was blurring. I spent more time planning, more time observing. The hotel room was no longer a temporary refuge. It was my headquarters, my war room. Maps, notes, and printouts covered every surface, a testament to my growing obsession. I needed to get closer. I needed to infiltrate their lives more directly. The anonymous messages were too impersonal, too distant. I needed to make it personal. I thought about his work, his career, something that would damage him, something that would undermine his reputation. An anonymous tip, a fabricated accusation, a carefully planted piece of evidence. It was risky, it was dangerous, but the risk was part of the thrill. The danger added an edge to the game. I started to lose track of time. Days and nights blurred together. I barely ate, barely slept. My focus was singular, unwavering. I saw her, less and less. She was becoming a ghost in my memory, replaced by the image of her with him. The anger towards her was a constant, throbbing ache, but it was now mixed with something else, a strange kind of pity. She was a pawn in my game now, a tool to be used, a means to an end. I felt myself becoming more isolated. The hotel staff, the occasional stranger I passed on the street, they were all just background noise. My world was shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller, until it contained only me and them. I started to make mistakes. Small ones at first, a careless word, a near miss. But they were signs that I was losing control, that the revenge was consuming me. The plan became more elaborate, more complex. I involved other people, unwitting accomplices in my twisted game, people who didn't know what I was doing, but who were nevertheless playing their part. I felt a strange kind of exhilaration, to be manipulating so many pieces, to be orchestrating events from the shadows. It was a dark, intoxicating power, but it was also terrifying. I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. His eyes were hard, his face drawn and pale. He was a stranger. I knew I was going too far. I knew I was losing myself, but I couldn't stop. The momentum of the revenge was too strong. It was a runaway train, and I was strapped to the front. The entanglement was deeper now. I was caught in my own web, trapped in a cycle of deception and manipulation. I was no longer just seeking revenge, I was drowning in it. The line between right and wrong, between justice and vengeance, had blurred completely. I was lost in the darkness, and I didn't know how to find my way back. The plan was nearing its climax. The final act was about to begin, and I knew deep down that this was the point of no return. He was starting to unravel. I could see it in the way he moved, the way he spoke. The confidence, the swagger, it was all gone, replaced by a nervous energy, a constant vigilance. He checked his rearview mirror constantly, his eyes darting from side to side. He changed his route to work, his usual haunts. He was looking over his shoulder, always. I saw him argue with his friends. His voice, usually smooth and assured, was now tight and strained. He was snapping at them, accusing them of what? I couldn't hear the words, but the tension was palpable. He was losing his grip. I learned about his past, his own betrayals, his own secrets, things I could use, things that would add fuel to the fire I had already started. He wasn't the innocent party I had initially imagined. He had his own darkness, his own capacity for deception. It made it easier somehow to justify what I was doing. He started to drink more. I saw him at bars, alone, nursing a glass of whiskey, his face etched with worry. He was becoming a shadow of his former self. I felt a strange sense of pity, but it was fleeting, quickly replaced by the cold, hard resolve that had taken root within me. He was getting what he deserved. But then something unexpected happened, something that wasn't part of my plan, something that threw a wrench into everything. He lost his job, a rumor, a whisper campaign, just like the ones I had started, but this time it was aimed at him. It was almost too perfect, too convenient. I felt a jolt, a sudden, sharp realization that I wasn't the only one playing this game. Someone else was out there moving the pieces, manipulating the board. My carefully constructed plan started to unravel. The threads I had been pulling were now being pulled in other directions. The control I thought I had was slipping away. He became desperate. I saw him begging, pleading, trying to salvage his career, but it was too late. The damage was done. I felt a sense of unease, a growing suspicion that I was no longer in control, that I had become a pawn in a larger game. The consequence of my actions were spreading, reaching further than I had anticipated. People were getting hurt. Lives were being affected. I started to question the path I had chosen. Was this really justice, or was it just destruction? Was I becoming the very thing I hated? He reached out to her. A desperate phone call, a tearful plea. I saw her face as she listened, a mixture of guilt and something else. Something that looked like fear. She was starting to see the consequences too. The ripples of my actions were spreading, engulfing us all. I realized that my revenge wasn't just about them. It was about me. It was about my pain, my anger, my need for control, and it was destroying me. The game was changing, the rules were shifting, and I was no longer sure who was winning. The other man was suffering, but so was I, and so was she. The darkness I had unleashed was consuming us all, and I didn't know how to stop it. She wasn't passive. I had underestimated her. I had seen her as a victim, a pawn in my game, but she was stronger than that. She was starting to fight back. I saw her change. The sadness, the guilt, it was still there, but it was hardening. Her eyes, once soft and filled with warmth, were now sharp and calculating. She was becoming resourceful. She started to investigate. I saw her on her phone, making calls, her voice low and urgent. She was meeting with people, whispering in corners, her expression guarded. I felt a jolt of, what was it? Not fear exactly, but a sense of unease. The control I thought I had was slipping. The power dynamics were shifting. She was no longer just reacting to my moves. She was making her own. She was becoming a player in this twisted game, and she was playing to win. I learned about her past, things I hadn't known, secrets she had kept, a resilience, a strength that I had never fully appreciated. She had her own motivations, her own reasons for what she had done. It wasn't just a mistake, a moment of weakness. It was something more complex, something rooted in our relationship. The truth started to surface slowly, painfully. The cracks in our marriage, the things we had ignored, the things we had swept under the rug, they were all coming to light. I saw her with her friends, her real friends, the ones I had never really known, never really understood. They were supporting her, advising her, helping her to fight back. She wasn't alone. She had allies, people who were on her side, people who saw her as more than just a cheater, a betrayer. The power I had wielded, the power of anonymity and manipulation, it was starting to wane. She was finding her own power, her own voice. I felt a strange kind of respect, a reluctant admiration for her strength, her resilience, but it was mixed with a growing sense of loss. The woman I thought I knew was gone. She had been replaced by someone else, someone stronger, someone more formidable. She made a move, a bold, unexpected move that directly challenged my plans. She went public. She told her side of the story to our friends, to our family, to the world. She didn't deny what she had done, but she explained it. She talked about our marriage, our problems, the things that had led her to him. My secrets were out, my actions, my revenge. It was all exposed. The whispers were no longer anonymous. They were out in the open for everyone to see. The game had changed again. It was no longer a shadow war. It was a public battle, and I was no longer in control. She had turned the tables. She had taken back the power, and I was left reeling, exposed and vulnerable. The ending was no longer clear. The path I had been on was no longer straight. The future was uncertain, and I knew with a sinking feeling that I had lost. The confrontation was inevitable, a collision course set in motion weeks ago, now hurtling towards impact. I found myself facing her, not in the shadows, but in the harsh glare of reality. It wasn't a planned meeting. It was a chance encounter, a collision of paths in a place that held too many memories. A restaurant, our restaurant, the air crackled between us. The unspoken words, the accusations, the betrayals, they hung heavy in the space, thick and suffocating. The other diners faded into a blurry background, their conversations a meaningless hum. We spoke, not shouting, not screaming, but with a quiet intensity, a controlled fury that was far more potent. Words like weapons, each one aimed to wound, to inflict pain. I laid it all out, my plan, my actions, my revenge. I didn't hold back. I wanted her to see the depth of my hurt, the extent of my rage. She listened, her face a mask of emotions. Anger, yes, but also sadness, regret, and something else, something that looked like understanding. She didn't deny her affair. She didn't try to excuse it, but she told me her truth about us, about our marriage, about the things that had led her astray. It wasn't what I wanted to hear. It wasn't the justification I was expecting, but it was honest, and it was devastating. The climax wasn't a single act of revenge. It was this conversation, this brutal, unflinching exposure of our shared failures, the culmination of everything that had led us here. The fallout was immediate. The repercussions of my actions, of her actions, of our actions, they crashed down upon us, a tidal wave of consequences. Our friends took sides, our families were torn apart. The life we had built together crumbled into dust. He was gone, his career in ruins, his reputation shattered. A casualty of our war, a victim of our mutual destruction. She was changed, harder, yes, but also more real, more authentic. The fragile facade of our perfect life had been stripped away, leaving something raw and exposed. And me, I was empty. The satisfaction I had craved, the justice I had sought, it was hollow. It was ashes in my mouth. The anger was gone. The revenge had been exacted, but in its place was a void, a vast, echoing emptiness that consumed me. I had won, but I had lost everything. The immediate aftermath was chaos, a whirlwind of accusations, recriminations, and despair. But beneath the chaos, there was a strange kind of clarity. It was over. The game was over, and the pieces lay scattered, broken beyond repair. The future stretched before me, a vast, unknown landscape, and I was alone, utterly, irrevocably alone. The silence is the loudest sound now. It fills the days, the nights, the spaces where laughter and arguments used to be. It's a heavy, suffocating silence, the sound of what's lost. I look back. At the beginning, the shock, the pain, the burning need for retribution. I see the path I took, the choices I made, the person I became. It's like watching a film, a dark, twisted drama where I'm both the protagonist and the villain. Was it worth it? The question echoes in my mind over and over, and I still don't have a definitive answer. The anger is gone, replaced by a dull ache, a constant awareness of the damage done. She's different. We see each other occasionally, at a distance, across a crowded room. Her eyes are guarded, her smile hesitant. She's rebuilding, I think, trying to piece together a life from the wreckage. He's a ghost. He disappeared from our world. His career, his reputation, his life, all shattered. I hear whispers, rumors of where he went, what he's doing, but he's gone. The consequences are far-reaching. Our friends are divided. Some understand, some condemn. Our families, they're fractured. The ties that bound us, weakened, strained, perhaps broken forever. I'm alone. Not in the physical sense, but in a deeper, more profound way. The isolation that began during the revenge has become a permanent state. I've built walls around myself, walls of regret and self-recrimination. I think about the nature of betrayal, not just the act itself, but the ripple effect, the way it poisons everything, the way it changes people, the way it can destroy lives. And revenge, I understand it now, not as justice, but as a form of self-destruction. It's a dark path that leads only to more darkness, a cycle of pain that perpetuates itself. I've learned a bitter lesson, a lesson about the fragility of trust, the destructive power of anger, and the long-lasting consequences of our choices. The future is uncertain. I don't know what it holds. I don't know if I can ever truly heal, if I can ever truly forgive myself. But I'm trying. I'm trying to move forward, to find a way to live with the weight of the past, to build something new, something different from the ashes. It's a slow... The scars remain. They're a part of me now, a constant reminder of what happened, of what I did, but they're also a reminder of what I survived. And maybe, just maybe, they're a reminder that I can survive anything, even this, even myself,